Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we are going to share werewolf horror stories. First story, The Shadow of the Wolf. Before I begin, I'll give you some pretense. My name is Axel, and I am a 23-year-old man living partially reliant on my parents. Together, we live in upstate Alaska, not so far off the edge of Anchorage. A small, tucked-away town nestled in the woods. Anything and everything that we can't get from our neighbors or the surrounding woods requires at least 40 minutes of driving. That's for a one-way trip, mind you. By partially reliant, I mean that I live in their house, but I contribute my own rent, food, and utility money. It is not a lot, considering the basic home we have, but it made me feel like more of a man. And the low cost eased the pressure off my wallet, allowing me to buy things for my own enjoyment. I pride myself in being logical and mentally sound. Ghost stories do not scare me, though they serve to give me mighty entertaining evenings. And any fears of wild things out in the woods, which were not unjustified due to predators in the area, were quickly dissuaded when I purchased a hunting shotgun for my 20th birthday. Like it or not, I have yet to meet a creature alive that resists 12 gauge completely. I believe the old adage is, if it bleeds, you can kill it, though there are many variations. It is important to note that I keep the gun in my back seat, loaded, but chamber empty, so that any jolts don't set off the trigger and give my passenger door a case of lead poisoning. So, understanding all of this, I hope you can come to realize why the fear I felt was so foreign, so intense, that I became afraid of the fear itself. It began one evening, a normal day with clear skies that had been woefully uneventful, a fact doubled by my boss letting me know that he had enough hands on deck for the weekend. There was a lack of snow on the ground, a rare occasion in winter, but the grass outside had frost on it that sparkled in the dying light of the sun. My mother had asked me to drive to the store and pick up a few groceries. Meat was already taken care of, so it was just a few simple herbs. Any annoyance at taking such a long drive for likely no more than $10 of ingredients was far overshadowed by the satisfaction of having something to do. Grabbing my keys, I quickly ran across the driveway, trying not to breathe the far below frozen air too deeply. The rusted old truck I drove had a terrible heater, and I probably wouldn't get much warmer until I made it to the store. With my breath fogging against the windshield, I made my way into the back roads. On either side of me, extinguishing any light the near-dead sun would have allotted me, were thick masses of pine trees. The first half of my journey was uneventful, as was the shopping itself, save for one detail. Animal crossing signs were always prevalent on these roads, moose being the main threat. So when I saw a new sign, one with fresh paint and an odd red reflective coat, I couldn't help but read it. Warning: timber wolf pack sighting. Aside from the silhouette of a large wolf on the sign, no other indicators were given. I can admit now that the choice of wording was a bit strange. Typically they simply say something like animal crossing and a silhouette of whatever animal was in question. Any confusion or questioning I had faded just as fast as the sign flew by my side. In fact, the sign was entirely forgotten about by the time I had rung up the ingredients requested of me. Once again, crossing the lot to my truck exposed me to the freezing air. But this time my truck's age paid for itself with the amazing insulative properties of a solid steel body, and the cabin was actually comfortable when I got back. With the radio shifting between static and old country blues, I began the second half of my drive back, noting the time had already crawled to 9 p.m. Once the tiny collection of streetlight had disappeared in my rearview mirrors, I was left with absolutely no light besides my dim yellow headlights. Bored as I was, the drive served to be relaxing, giving me plenty of time to think, an overly common pastime of mine. I was perhaps halfway through crafting the subplot of my very own movie when the same red sign flashed out against my headlights, nearly unnatural in its glaring brightness. The briefest of chills brushed my neck and I cussed, making sure all windows were soundly rolled up. When I finished my check, having seen no gap between glass and door, the sign was long behind me. Though the chill had left me, I dropped a gear to raise the RPM of the engine, hoping the additional motion would translate into more heat for me. Not even a minute after I heard my radio cut out. It didn't go silent, but the shift from music to static was hard and sudden. Behind the static, in place of where music should have been, was the faintest high-pitched ringing, like microphone feedback resonating with itself. It was piercing, yet overpowered by the static that now seemed just slightly louder than any music I had been listening to so far. I went to crank down the volume, already beginning to feel an earache coming along. I twisted once, twice, and on the third turn the knob fell right off, bumping my leg and landing somewhere in the passenger floorboard. I cussed again. Even if the radio was at a more acceptable volume, I still had to find that part before it disappeared into the same unknown space every mechanic's 10mm goes to. In a rather stupid decision, I centered my truck between the two-lane asphalt, giving myself enough room on either side to not roll into a ditch while I was rooting around next to me. My eyes were off the road for perhaps 3 seconds total, my fingers almost immediately finding the radio knob and chucking it into my door handle. But when I looked up, there was a figure in the road. It didn't dart out like some swift shadow, but simply sat there as I approached. I was lucky for my earlier drop in gear, as it reduced my speed and gave me time to hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, tires screeching while my eyes flung dangerously close to the steering wheel before the seatbelt caught me. I lurched as it stopped and was rocked back into my seat and into the perfect position to stare at the figure in the road. I had half expected the damn thing to dart away as it realized the glowing 2-ton mass of metal was heading towards it. Instead, my gaze met the eyes of a wolf, barely a dozen feet from the front of my truck. It, like myself, was situated perfectly in the center of the road. My headlights cast against its body, painting the animal's shadow against the aged pavement beyond it. Even as I caught my breath, the wolf did not move. Its pitch-black coat betrayed the earlier sign of timber wolves, but damn if this thing wasn't huge. I swear its head was damn near in line with my own, or at least up to the hood, enough that, even crouched over as wolves are, its posture still allowed its own eyes to lock with mine. God, those eyes. That's where it started. Though unnerving in size, I was certain that anything this wolf could try would at worst leave some dents and scratches into my truck, which was already a relic. But those eyes, they burned a deep crimson, as if an artist had perfectly captured the embers at the center of a campfire, but had run out of orange and yellow to paint them, settling on the bloodiest of reds. I was frozen then, though I didn't realize it for a few more moments. I could only stare it back, the ungodly shade of red seeming to burn itself into my mind. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing. Then it began to change. No, I'm getting it mixed up. The wolf itself did not change, but the air did. The radio static, having before been reduced to nothing but a dull roar in my ears, was ever so slowly ramping up in intensity. The ringing was back, now beginning to overtake the static in its volume. My ears stung, my eyes burned. I was cold. Everything continued getting worse from there. I began shivering subconsciously as I gazed at the wolf, seeing its massive form casting shadows behind it. Was it closer now? I couldn't tell. From my peripheral vision, my eyes still locked with its own, I could see movement behind it. The shadows were moving, rolling, bubbling, shifting. They grew and shrank, stretched and contracted. God, it felt like the shadows were screaming at me. It felt like the wolf's eyes were glowing brighter. God, it was closer. Not by much, maybe only a few feet, but it had moved. How did it move? I was staring right at it, unblinking even, and yet I never saw a thing. I felt cold, beyond cold. Like the chill seeping into my veins was slowly coagulating my blood, thickening it until it felt like my heart was pumping slush through my veins. I wasn't breathing. The fear started then. First it was confusion, then apprehension, and now I was afraid. The moment I realized the fear, it seemed to multiply hundreds of times. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, but I had to, primal fear taking over me. I needed to put miles, no, worlds between me and this thing. My body shook violently, damn near seizing. Whether it was from the cold or my efforts to move, I cannot say. It was closer again, 6 feet at most. Those shadows still rolled, ripping apart and converging like mutating meat. The feeling was beyond fear now. It wasn't simply me being afraid of being mauled to death by this wolf. No, in that moment mauling would have been a better alternative. It was as if I was afraid this creature would somehow destroy the very idea of me, rending my soul into tatters and tearing into my spirit like fresh bloody meat. Escape was no longer on my mind, at least not physical escape. As the wolf approached, somehow moving despite my eyes telling me otherwise, it placed a paw onto the hood of my truck. I began straining for a different kind of movement. I tried to reach in the back, towards the shotgun I kept in the seat. No, dear reader, I was not reaching back with the intention of placing buckshot into this creature's head. I was reaching backwards with the intention of killing myself, blowing my brains out at whatever cost, in the hope that the swift death it brought me might save my essence from being torn apart by this otherworldly predator. But I could not move. I was trapped in my own shaking, ice-cold body. My chest burned with both a lack of oxygen and the feeling of my heart struggling to move my blood, now feeling like molasses within my veins. My ears stung with the sound of the radio's incessant ringing, and now I swore I could hear screams from it as well. Human, animal, and anything else you can image, all crying in terror and fear. The wolf was perched entirely on my hood now, glaring down at me through the windshield as the entire truck had lurched forwards under its weight. Its gaze burned. The expression of the wolf was not what one would expect from a predator about to catch a meal. It seemed as if it was only observing me, waiting for me to die. Soon I would, as I was now certain my heart had given up its futile effort to move my frozen blood. Then, barely audible over the radio, there was another sound. A deep, splintering crack, far unlike anything simply stepping on a branch. It was the sound of an entire tree's trunk being swiftly rent apart. The wolf's head snapped to the side, freeing me of its gaze. My veins ached as blood began to move again, feeling like ice crystals were being pushed through them. I raked in a breath of air, one that was not ice cold, but rather the stale warm air of my truck's cabin. Along with the wolf, I instinctually turned to the source of the sound. It was a moose, but different. Its pelt was stark white against the black trees, its eyes glowing an incandescent blue, everything about it nearly mirroring the abomination perched on my hood, except its size. The sheer size of the beast caught me off guard. The wolf was still within the realm of possibility, though surely would have been the apex predator of whatever area it called home. But this moose was beyond massive, at least 12 feet at the shoulder with a rack wider than my own truck. Looking at it, I found the source of the cracking sound that had shook me loose of the wolf's impossible grasp. A pine tree, fully grown and plenty stout, had been shoved over by this thing's antlers. Now, its view unobstructed, it only stared at the wolf. And the wolf, for the first time since I had seen it, began to growl. The pitch-black fur on its back raised up as the wolf crouched, digging its claws into the hood of my truck. The growl was deep and rumbling, shaking the frame of the truck so much that I could hear loose objects rattling around. The moose responded, letting out the signature keening scream of a reindeer, but much lower. This sound shook my bones. The massive moose drug its hoof across the ground, creating a divot wide enough to make a sound grave, and snorted as it lowered its own head. The wolf, clearly far beyond anything I could hope to kill, began to back away. Like mercury, it seemed to almost flow off the hood of my vehicle, crouching onto the ground and retreating backwards into the woods, never breaking the gaze between the two creatures. When it was out of sight, and my blood had significantly thawed, the moose shifted its gaze to me. I felt no fear from it, but I did not feel like it was an ally either. Snorting again, it jerked its head down the road, as if telling me to leave, telling me that I wasn't welcome. I needed no further incentive to floor the gas, rocketing up to 80 miles per hour on thin back roads all the way back to my home. A 30-minute trip turned into just over 10 minutes, but it was long enough for my labored breathing to slow and for warmth to finally creep back into my bones. Upon my return, in which I sprinted from the driveway to the door, my parents must have known something was up. Deep inside I knew that they would never believe me if I told them everything. So I told them what I could. I nearly hit an animal on the road, a wolf, and in swerving I nearly fell into a deep ditch. Though they looked at me strangely, I told them the same thing I'll tell you. If you are alone on the roads at night and you see a wolf, don't stop or swerve. Simply look down and press the gas. Second story. We visited the cemetery on Werewolf Road. We were always told not to venture out on Werewolf Road late at night when we were children, but one night we were just too damn determined to know why the teenagers from our small town were so frightened by the unnerving place that we had to see for ourselves. I had my small backpack loaded with snacks, a flashlight with spare batteries, a flare gun with a can of bear spray, and attached to my backpack was my sleeping bag. The four of us gathered together behind my cousin's house, who lived just 2 houses down across the street, and together we all exchanged scary legends and stories we had heard about the road and the cemetery on it. I heard there's a woman in the trees who jumps on people's cars late at night. She sleeps on a mattress with her dead, rotting baby. Evan said with a morbid sense of pride in his voice. That's baloney, my cousin Justin said, shaking his head. I heard she was just drunk and that happened once. The baby wasn't dead. The police took it from her, though, he said in a matter-of-fact tone. You guys ever hear about the dead puppy in the box my brother found in the cemetery? I said aloud. The other 3 looked at me, their eyes widening with interest as I spoke up. He said he went up there alone one day around 2 years ago when we moved here. He said he was walking through the graveyard, and near one of the tombstones there was a purple box. He saw blood on the outside of the box and grabbed a stick to open it, and there was a dead puppy that someone sacrificed. He looked up and saw streamers in the trees and an area where it looked like there was a fire. For 4 adolescent boys with active imaginations, you could only picture how terrified we were. There would have been next to no possibility that we would venture out anywhere such as that alone, but together, it was a different story. We were all in this together, despite how frightening it was. Oh, come on, he's just jacking with ya. Ronnie, the youngest of us 4, spouted. I could tell if he was lying, and believe me, he wasn't. He had a look on his face that makes me feel like he wasn't. Are we gonna do this or not? Justin said, seemingly irritated by the stories. We each shrugged and picked up our belongings, and next thing we knew, we were walking towards the woods that led to the legendary road on the other side. The leaves and sticks cracked beneath our feet as we stumbled around in the pitch-black summer night. Justin had his flashlight shining ahead of our group. The narrow beam shone the heavy thicket that surrounded us. In some places you could see, even in the absence of light, the silhouettes of fast food litter like styrofoam cups of various sizes and plastic bottles or discarded cans that were scattered about. I felt the crunch of an empty beer can under my foot. I cursed under my breath as I realized just how loud and inconvenient my misstep was. Evan turned around and shushed me as we continued walking. "Fuck off, Evan," I said in a stern but quiet voice. I raised my hand as he turned forward, the thought crossing my mind to smack the back of his head. I bit my bottom lip and considered how bad that could be for us if the wrong group of people noticed our presence. Okay, I can see the road. We need to decide right now if we are going to drop our stuff off first and then continue, or if we're going to take everything, Justin said. I looked around at the flat, dry ground that was covered in leaves nearby. "That looks like a perfect area to set up camp," I said, pointing at the spot. We all four removed our bags as we walked over to the grounds I chose, setting them down. "Anything valuable any of you might need to grab before we go?" Justin asked. I ran to my bag and grabbed the bear spray, assuming it would be good just in case we ran into some trouble. Ronnie and Evan shook their heads and continued with him as he moved his flashlight from off our newly claimed campsite and headed for the cemetery on Werewolf Road. I quickly caught up to them as we continued. In the humid summer night, there wasn't a sound to be heard besides a barn owl that could be heard in a tree nearby, and our feet lightly moving across the earth. We reached the dirt road, and I raised my head and looked around as what sounded like something heavy fell through a mess of branches, perhaps a decrepit tree or a large animal. Whatever that was, it wasn't small. I heard Ronnie say. I looked over at him and was leaning over his bent knees, wiping his sweaty face off with his dark shirt. He raised up and shook it, attempting to cool off. We four sat in silence. The night now grew more ominous. We stared at the dirt road, and I now looked to the right, remembering the wooden bridge that led to the cemetery. "It's this way," I said. We continued walking. I turned around to notice the rest of the group behind me, Justin still holding the flashlight, but aiming it up in the trees rather than the very dark road ahead. "Justin, can I see the flashlight?" I asked. "Here you go," he said as he quickly stretched his arm out and held it out like the Olympic torch. We approached the wooden bridge. As we came closer, I looked out at the creek, where you could see a pile of dead hogs, perhaps 6 or more, on the creek bed. The stench from their rotting, bloated corpses fouled the air. On the bridge was a pentagram drawn out near the very center. It had been faded from the elements, but you could still see it fairly well. We gathered around it, not saying a thing aloud. "The cemetery is just up the road," I said. We continued across the bridge, and I noticed that Ronnie turned his head and looked back at the creek where the dead hogs were. "Did you guys see that? Or smell it at least?" We continued walking, not thinking too much about it. There could have been many reasons for that. Not every little thing had to be unusual, even to young boys who longed for excitement. As we got closer to the cemetery, we noticed a bright light coming from inside its fence. It was a fire. We rushed down the road, trying our best to stay low and keep quiet as we grew dangerously closer to the cemetery. We got off the road and made our way up a ditch, which led us into the woods that surrounded the cemetery fence line. As we lined up to peer through the fence, we were careful to stay low. Embers lingered around the blaze like fireflies in the cemetery landscape, and we watched as these beings that gathered around the fire. They weren't human. There hadn't been a chance they were human at all. They were beastly, savage creatures that were swift on all fours. When they were on the lookout, they stood on their hind legs and perched, exposing their ape-like chests and torsos. The rest of their bodies looked more canine, like a greyhound. Their faces were covered in heavy, beaked masks that looked similar to the surgeon makes worn during the Black Plague, but these were more of a ghastly sight on such already terrifying monsters. I knew we couldn't dare trespass on their fiery territory. I watched as one lurked near a tombstone and dug like a canine into the ground. I listened as we could hear what sounded like gurgling coming from the plot, dirt being thrown viciously behind the creature. The rest of the pack began to gurgle and click their mouths as they walked around the fire. 3 other creatures gathered near the burial plot where the first creature dug, and the other 3 stood on their hind legs and looked around. I watched as the creature that was now burrowed deep in the ground climbed out of the hole with a rotting arm in its mouth. It sat next to the others, arm between its 2 hands, sniffing. The others gurgled and sniffed in between chirps. Another creature crawled into the hole and came back to the surface with a dismembered leg in its mouth and carried it away from the rest of the group. Justin looked over at the rest of us with a face full of shock, and he spoke very hesitantly in an almost faint whisper, trying his best to control his breathing. "We've got to get the hell out of here. I don't know what those things are, but they aren't people. I say we leave our stuff at the campsite and get back to my place fast." The 4 of us backed away from the fence, and we got as close to the bottom of the ditch as we could. We knew that any little noise from us could be fatal. The sticky summer air attracted unrelenting mosquitoes that swarmed around our ears and our sweaty necks and arms. We tried for our lives to ignore the high-pitched buzz that rang in our ears as we crept towards the bridge. I heard a gurgling sound in a nearby tree overhead. It rattled and clicked, signaling the others to move in on us. I looked up to see it as, through its frightening mask that covered its disfigured face, it looked down on me with its black, dilated pupils as I felt the sweat collect in my eyes and the mosquitoes I refused to away at bite into my neck. The other 3 were frozen in place, staring at the creature as well. I smelled urine in the air from Ronnie, as he couldn't anymore hold his bladder in fear. I couldn't blame him. There wasn't a moment for ridicule or disparagement. The creature stared into our eyes, and I heard the fence line viciously rattle as the other creatures climbed and jumped it, closing in on our misfortunate, desperate souls. Justin spoke up. "Guys, any ideas?" I slowly reached into my pocket and felt for a lighter. In my other pocket was the big can of bear spray. We let them close in on us dangerously to our discomfort, but I knew this was an ample opportunity to quickly discharge as much of the can on them as I could while we still had a chance. I watched as the creatures fell on their backs, croaking and clicking their tongues with this very awful and loud scream that came out in between gurgles and rattles. They nervously clicked more after this. The creature in the tree appeared to fear jumping. It leapt in the opposite direction, scurrying near the cemetery fire. We quickly rushed across the bridge, we jumping into the creek near the dead hogs and trudging through the water. It was only 5 minutes or less to Justin's home. The time we counted down together, not allowing failure to escape the grip of such vile and heinous of creatures. We saw the porch light nearby as we entered into the neighborhood. It had been a welcome relief to know that we had arrived finally. As I reached Justin's patio under the floodlight, I took a moment to catch my breath. I turned my head to look around, and I realized I had been the only one who reached my cousin's backyard. I called out each of their names, but without success. I waited around 5 minutes, when I saw the beam of Justin's flashlight shine into the backyard from over the fence. I watched as him and Evan and Ronnie boosted each other over his fence as I continued to walk over to them and ask them what exactly kept them so long. I watched them, and something seemed different about their demeanors. They each had a look in their eyes that unnerved me. Justin spoke up. "You left us behind. You didn't even let us catch up with you. What the hell were you thinking?" he said angrily. I walked in circles, looking up at the three of them as they stared at me with unequivocal disapproval nonetheless. After the three of them refused to talk to me that night, I finally decided to walk home. As I got to my room, I quickly stripped to my boxers and fell onto my bed. I woke up around 8:30 in the morning to my father calling out to me from his office, and he said, "Tyler, come in here right now." I walked into my father's office. I watched as he held his bald fist over his mouth, leaning back in his leather chair. He ran his other hand through his hair and looked at me. "Your cousin and your friends are missing. What happened last night?" I thought about it for a moment, but hesitated on giving a full disclosure. "We just hung out till early this morning, and then I came home around 1 o'clock this morning. They were there when I left." "Did you go anywhere with them, or did they have somewhere they wanted to go?" He leaned forward. "The only place we went to was the cemetery on Werewolf Road." Third story. Hungry like the wolf. The big bad wolf archetype has existed for millennia. A large four-legged beast, a predator of savage cunning who preys on bored little boys crying for help when it's not needed, or little girls venturing into the woods unaided. A wolf may swallow a duck whole and alive in his haste, or blow a little piggy's house down, or he might go full Indiana Jones and trash a bad guy's cafe before heading into the jungle to face off against a tiger woman, to the soundtrack of 1980's Excess. I wonder if Duran Duran ever realized how close they came to the truth, as I stare at the goblet on the thick wooden table, its stem carved into a scraggly-haired arm with great claws cradling the cup. The primal nature of the goblet calls my attention to the present moment, standing at my father's right hand while he addresses the three men before him. It jars me, sometimes, to hear people of all ages refer to my father as Mr. Surname, or Sir. To me, he's just Dad. He has silver hair and weathered hands, regularly watches soccer or proper football, go Timbers, appreciates a smooth ouzo and a medium-rare steak, listens to Husker Du, and can rip a man apart with very little effort, figuratively and literally. Until recently, I wasn't well acquainted with that side of Dad. "Gentlemen," he begins, his voice gruff in that scored underworld quality that others find intimidating but which had, before now, always soothed me. "Some of you I have known since you were barely the height of this table. I have watched all of you grow into the men you are today, and it warms my heart to see the progress you have made." Do I detect sarcasm in his voice? I suppose he's always had a snarky edge. "I was once a rich man," he goes on. "I suppose I still am, by the metric most people use, but not by mine. No, I was once rich in companionship, family, love. I had a wonderful wife, who put up with me for God knows what reasons, and we had 3 beautiful children. And now, he looks at me, and I meet eyes of clouded hazel. Now my daughter is all I have left. My memories of Mom are universally wonderful, from her almost otherworldly beauty to her engaging playfulness and whimsy, to her calm yet firm lessons on how to be a good person. She was our rock, and watching her wither away from cancer, only to succumb last year, is something I still have not reconciled within myself. But my older brothers were a mixed bag. To put it mildly, the oldest was a shithead who always got into trouble, but it was always someone else's fault. He never took responsibility for himself. Shithead talked too much shit to the wrong people and was killed in prison, sadly to no one's surprise. My middle brother, Jason, the one I was closest to, and who was set to inherit our family's industrial empire, he was only 29 when he died. I remember coming home one day as a senior in high school to my parents sitting on the couch with the most defeated looks on their faces. They sat me down with them and informed me that Jason had been killed in a hiking accident. I felt so alone. Jason's fiancée, who I'd always liked, suffered a miscarriage not long afterward. She subsequently cut off contact with our family and moved somewhere far away. 17 was not a fun age for me. So that leaves me all my father has left. I try not to detect any regret in his tone. Try and fail. And since my Addie is all I have, Dad adds with more gravitas, turning back to the three men before us, I am compelled. No, let me rephrase that. I compel myself to ensure her safety and security for when I am gone. So that is why I have arranged this meeting tonight. Addie is young, beautiful, intelligent, as worthy a prize as any man could hope for. It takes all my effort not to scoff. I got my bachelor's, master's in urban planning, and secured a job with a prestigious firm, all by the time I was 25, only to be some man's prize. Why the hell did I come back to Portland? Oh yeah, Michael. That's why. And the job. And Dad. Because he needs me. And I'm all he has. So I stand next to him in silence and try desperately not to chew up the insides of my mouth in dread. Dad gestures to the goblet. In this cup are the three stones, our past, our present, and our future. And the future is marked in shadow, a veil through which we cannot see. Each of you will draw, and the men of the past and the present must yield to the man who will make our future. For these are our traditions. We have been raised in them, and they make us who we are.
The
sun rises and sets without men. A favored Greekism of Dad's. He uses it to convey that traditions and their circumstances endure beyond societal change. But I have doubts about how traditions can exist when no one practices them. Then again, we're secretly practicing an archaic tradition in 2019. So what do I know? Dad lifts the goblet in both his hands and proceeds from his left to his right, offering it to each man so they can withdraw a stone. I feel my heartbeats reverberate as I watch each hand descend into the deep cup. Chris goes first, and cannot hide his trepidation as he holds my father's gaze and withdraws a stone, paint stains lingering at his fingertips and around his nails as he closes his fist. We've been good friends since we were kids, and I'm one of few people in our hometown to whom he's out. One would think Portland would be one of the safest places for him to be himself, but his family would sadly disagree. And his family has most assuredly put him up to this. Being married to Chris would be weird. It wouldn't necessarily be miserable. We're friends, and we could both just look the other way. But still, way too weird. Next is Matt. We dated for a while in high school. He was my first actual boyfriend, though we never progressed beyond making out in a movie theater. Like me, he left Portland for a long time after we graduated, except he went all the way to New York City and stayed. I didn't have a chance to catch up with him before Dad's big ritual. As far as I know, he's just visiting his parents this week. I take in his appearance as he withdraws a stone. Matt still has that boyish cowlick at the back of his head that keeps him from ever being fully polished, and his tie's a little loose. I always liked his unkempt charm, even after I broke up with him as an immature teenager. Being married to him wouldn't be so bad, unless, of course, he'd completely lost all his feelings for me, which, over the course of 10 years, was the most likely outcome. His family probably put him up to this, too. Marriage to him certainly wouldn't be marriage to Michael. Finally, Dad reaches Josh. There were times in my life when my dreams were memories of running my fingers through his silky black hair and holding him close to smell his cool water. Those times were long gone. I never cheated, but I'd left Matt for Josh back in high school. Josh had been 2 years ahead of us, which was how I could attend prom as a sophomore, and he seemed like everything I could have wanted in a boy. Handsome, witty, brutally sexy. Real Twilight shit. He was definitely the boy I wanted, but not the man. I discovered this after he went off to OSU and proceeded to sleep with every girl under the sun, while talking to me on the phone maybe once a week. I'm so glad I insisted on a condom when he came back home for Thanksgiving. He could have given me a number of STIs. We were done long before Christmas, and as far as I know, Josh hasn't stopped being a douchebag in the intervening decade. And looking back at some of the shit he pulled in our relationship, I wouldn't doubt it if he hasn't taken more than one woman's no for an answer. I would kill Josh before marrying him. The 3 stones withdrawn from the goblet, Dad sets it down gently on the table. He turns to the first man. Christos, are you the man of the future? Chris opens his palm to display a rough dunite stone, speckled evergreen and lime. I am sorry to say, Dad says with a sigh, that you are not the man we're looking for.
Périménète GIA tous Sophotrou Saint-Voulou, Aura.
Wait for that wisest of all counselors, time. Dad has always admired Pericles, and likely figures this is the gentlest thing he can tell a rebuffed suitor. Chris, however, barely conceals his sigh of relief. For my part, I'm glad not to be cajoled into being a man's beard. Then Dad turns to Matt. Mattheos, are you the man of the future? What if he is? I'm a bundle of nerves as Matt opens his palm. A speckled dunite stone. Paramanete Gia tu Sophoteris Symbolis. Aura, Dad repeats without preamble. He's always been like this with Matt, and I used to think it was just because Dad didn't like him. But now I believe he knows Matt responds best to forthrightness. And now Matt simply nods and stands straight. Josh doesn't even wait for my dad to address him before opening his palm and revealing a misshapen pebble of gleaming crude bitumen. Joshua, Dad announces in a deep, smooth voice. You are the man of the future. You don't know how happy I am to hear that, sir, Josh replies with what might be a genuine smile. Oh God, I'm going to throw up. But Dad puts the brakes on the celebration. I could see you as an exemplary protege and a loyal husband to my daughter. However, I must assign you one task of paramount importance before I grant you what you desire. Anything is Josh's only reply, and I feel myself growing dizzy and short of breath. Bring me the head of Michael Swindlehurst. What little breath I have rushes out of me as the weight of my father's words hit me like 2 tons of bricks. He didn't actually just demand Michael's head, did he? Now let me have a look at you, my father tells him, his true meaning implicit. Obeying the command, Josh becomes one of our true selves and releases the lycanthropos. His nails curve into talons, and his hands become more gnarled. The hair on them lengthens and darkens, the trend extending past the sleeves of his leather jacket to all over his body, up to his face, though the hair on his scalp remains the same black silk. His eyes redden in the transformation, and with a huff of breath he becomes the nightmarish figure storytellers have relished for eons. Josh's change prompts my father's, which admittedly looks bizarre in his sweater and collared shirt. Like a true wolf in sheep's clothing, Dad's silver fur belies an intractable, fierce tenacity. Michael Swindlehurst, Dad practically spits with contempt, his lycanthrope voice an even more gravelly baritone. He has brought shame and dishonor upon my house. The world is your oyster, Joshua Megalos. Complete this perilous task, and you've found your pearl. Both revert back to their human selves. I will not disappoint you, sir, Josh solemnly vows. He turns toward me now, and it takes all my strength not to shiver in fear and revulsion. Josh tells me in a voice that could easily be mistaken for sincerity, Addie, I've been in love with you for almost 10 years. I had your affection once, but I was a fool and I squandered it. Josh rounds the table to stand before me. I vow to you, here and now, that I will never disappoint you again. Oh, I don't know. Killing the love of my life and bringing his head to my father might dampen my mood. Just a smidge. I remain a stone as he leans down and places a soft, barely there kiss on my cheek. Then he looks into my eyes and says earnestly, "You will make a lovely wife and mother." The acidic, metallic taste of bile makes its home on my tongue. Josh turns around and leaves the den, no doubt already devising a way to dispatch Michael, while I try to devise a way to warn him. My phone isn't on me. It's in my purse, which I had laid next to one of the chairs, but it isn't there. Most likely Dad had gotten the maid, or one of his bodyguards, to confiscate it. My car keys are in there. How could I leave here to warn Michael? Breathe, Addie. Breathe. Don't panic. I follow Josh outside, my pace at first slow and measured but becoming more brisk with each step until I reach him at his car door. Don't do this, I say firmly, trying to hide the pleading note from my voice. Why not? Josh asks me, as though it were a genuine, legitimate question. Addie, I've been chosen. It would be a huge insult to your father to not carry this out. And what about insulting me? I reply in my lowest, stoniest voice. Josh, we're talking about killing someone. And if I don't do this, haven't you thought about the fact that it could be my head on a silver platter? I shake my head. No, my dad wouldn't do that. With all due respect, Addie, Josh interrupts, in that classic phrase that really means kiss my ass, I think your father hides a great deal from you. My ears buzz as I shiver in a gust of wind.
No.
No, he would not kill you because I told you not to kill someone. Why do you care so much about this guy? He asks with a tilt of his head, oddly unperturbed by the situation. Chris knows about my secret boyfriend, but I don't know if Josh or Matt do. Shrugging, I tell him, I don't, and hope I look convincing. Josh is silent for a long time, and then he places his car key in his pocket, takes my cold hands into his, gazes into my eyes, and tells me earnestly, tonight is the first night of the rest of our lives, Adrastia. It starts to drizzle, which for Portland is nothing new, and he drives off as a thunderclap rolls in the distance. I stare down the block until Josh's black sedan turns a corner and out of sight, the absence of his taillights unfreezing me. Walking back up the front stairs and through the door to my childhood home, my heels click on the black and white tile of the foyer, and then on the parquet floor between the Persian rugs. I stride past the vaguely medieval decor at a brisk but ladle-like pace to the study so I can pour myself a healthy scotch. Or 3. As I unlock the Tantalus, I hear footsteps behind me. Dad, I'm really not interested in speaking to you, or asking your permission. I doubt you'd do anything I asked, even if I crawled on my hands and knees over broken glass. I whip my head around to see Matt standing in the doorway, hands in his trouser pockets, his posture belying an insecurity that his resolute face is trying to hide. I didn't expect you in here, I say, pouring myself a tumbler. Would you like one? No, thank you. I'm driving. Suit yourself. I replace the decanter and take a sip of the warm amber liquid. Is Chris still here? Are you kidding? He hightailed it, Matt says as he steps further into the study, the carpet muffling his steps. How are you holding up? I set the tumbler down on the sideboard. My father just put out a hit on my boyfriend. How should I be? Despite Matt's presence, I try to think of a way to escape my childhood home undetected. You have no way of alerting him? Matt asks, looking completely unsurprised at the mention of my boyfriend. I shake my head. Dad disconnected the landline last year, and my purse was confiscated by somebody. I'd have to fight to get it back. I take another sip. Maybe I will. Or maybe his flight was delayed, and he's not even at home yet. Flight? Matt asks. Yeah, he had to go to LA for a special work thing. Some kind of meeting. I forget. Honestly, I take a gulp of scotch. He said he'd take it easy tonight, and we'd meet tomorrow. Don't know if that'll happen now. Finishing my scotch rather aggressively, I start to pour myself a second when I stop, a horrible realization creeping up my spine like a spider's legs. I didn't just give you an idea, did I? Matt shakes his head, nonplussed. What idea? To steal Josh's kill? You're not thinking of doing that, are you? Why the fuck would I do that? Says Matt, so quickly and nonchalantly that I look directly at him to make sure that wasn't some sort of rehearsed response. I want to believe it's the truth, that he would have no reason to beat Josh to the punch and kill Michael, but something in the slight narrowing of his eyes suggests anger to me, and I try to figure out why. Then I have my answer. Of course, that was stupid of me. I pour my second scotch. Forget I said anything? No, why? Of course he can't leave it alone. Because you'd only have two reasons to do that. Either you're trying to protect Michael, which I don't even think you know him, so why would you do that? I drain half my scotch and start to laugh. Or you're trying to win me from Josh. Or Mike. Or whoever. I don't even fucking know anymore. I'm laughing uncontrollably at this point. And you're right. Why the fuck would you do that? He says nothing as I continue laughing and drinking, finishing the tumbler. I actually think about pouring myself a third, but my lightweight ass decides it's too much effort. I'm laughing so hard tears are coming out of my eyes, but I forget what was so funny in the first place. And that Matt is still in the study. I look up and see him standing there, unmoved from his previous spot. His eyes no longer possess anger, but there's something else in there now. Something sad and puppy dog-like. It makes me angry, irrationally angry. Still laughing, I ask him, What, Matt, what are you thinking about? I'm thinking that the booze isn't helping. I stop laughing. Get out. Get the fuck out. Why did you even come here tonight? Get out. I'm at him before I even realize, beating at his chest to get him to leave. But my haphazard, drunken movements are easily repelled, and he traps my wrists in a firm grip. Addie, calm down. Let go. There's a brief back and forth before a new presence enters the study. My father, stocky and standing firm in the doorway, a cool exterior but ready to shred a motherfucker. Fuck him. You, I shout, breaking away from Matt and pointing an accusatory finger at my father. Without missing a beat, my father turns to Matt and says, I think it's time for you to leave, Mattheos. He steps to the side and takes a deep breath. I agree, sir, he replies simply, and he goes off, out of the house and into the night. I wait for the front door to shut before I lay into my father. You dense motherfucker. How can you possibly think this is a good idea? What did Michael ever do to you? Are you actually drunk right now, Addie? He asks, unfazed by my volume or disrespect. Answer me. Not until you calm down. Now breathe. He takes deep breaths, in and out, like he wants me to emulate him. Not having another choice, I copy him and feel some of the rage dissipate, though it's replaced with a soul-deep melancholy, a grief over a change I know is inevitable. Answer: me. Michael is not the right man for you, my father says simply, going over to set the Tantalus to rights. He mutters afterward, not a right man, period. Why? Because he's not a lycanthrope? And he deserves to die because of that? Let's just say I know things, all right? Oh, what do you know? I ask rhetorically, but my father replies, I know things that will make you want to scratch his face off. But regardless, even if we didn't do the ritual, you still shouldn't marry the bastard. I mean, Swindlehurst. Swindle. It's right there in his name. That's not what his name means, I mutter helplessly. It actually refers to swineherding. But I'm not about to explain Old English etymology to a man whose little hair remaining on his head I want to rip right out. You have no right to demand his death when he has done nothing to you. Now where's my purse? Where's my phone? Who has it? Nothing, he repeats cryptically, looking at the pattern on the Persian pile. Yeah, nothing. Then he looks up, right into my eyes. You know, sometimes, Adrastia, you really are your own nemesis. I shake my head, unable to look at him any longer. Get away from me. I hate you. With that, I turn and flee up the stairs to my old room, not even thinking about my steps and just working from muscle memory until I slam the door behind me. My room had become another office/storage space, a significantly more utilitarian desk than the one in the study occupying the center, surrounded by file cabinets, autographed band pictures, and one lonely ficus. I collapse into the desk chair, turn my head to the side, and see my father's old record player, a shelf of his records next to it. I can't deal with the pitter-patter of rain against the window. I need to shut it out. So I flip through the records, past Juju, Unknown Pleasures, Murmur, until I finally hit Zen Arcade. I rest the needle on side one, and the quick drum beats buzz in my head, melding with the fuzzy guitars as I try to get away from this nightmare. Something I learned today, /black and white is always gray / looking through the window pane / I'm not inside your brain. I look through the window at the rainy night beyond. Michael is out there, alone, hunted. Screw phones. Screw cars. I'm a fucking lycanthrope. What am I doing sitting here? So I throw open the window and get out onto the ledge. My hair is already up, so I don't have to worry about it falling into my eyes. But I know I can't do this in heels, kicking them off and watching them fall to the ground below. I retain firm footing on the narrow surface, and I know what I have to do. I change. The sable fur grows out of my arms and legs, shielding me from the wind and shining in the light from the street lamps. My fur makes me feel warm and fuzzy, though that could also have been the scotch. I sniff and smell the moss and petrichor even up here, and my vision and hearing sharpen. The drain pipe is next to me, but further than a simple step. Gathering courage, I rear back and howl to the rain clouds blocking the moon. Swinging to the side, I catch the drain pipe in my strong lycanthrope grip, careful not to shred it with my claws, and slide down. Once in the backyard, I know I'm free, and I rush past the covered pool and the flowers and the vegetable garden, through the neighbor's property and even further, cutting through backyards and alleyways until I hit Holiday Park. It's one of Portland's smaller parks, but there are always people, even at night, even in the soft Portland rain. So as soon as I hit the first clearing, I revert back to my human form, the cold, wet ground now irritating the soles of my bare feet as I walk briskly for a couple blocks. Approaching Michael's high-rise, I take in my surroundings. There is a fenced farmer's market area across the street, and through the wrought iron slats I see something out of place. Something isn't right. Something on the ground doesn't belong amongst the grass and hedges. I cross the street, and when I reach the fence I see a jacketed figure on the ground. Is this Josh? I hop the fence with no difficulty and prowl the perimeter, the figure not moving at all. This isn't what someone casing a property would do. This doesn't make any sense. Maybe this is completely unrelated. Regardless, I'm not letting my guard down. I creep up to the still figure and snatch his shoulder. "Chris," I shout, and he groans awake in the drizzling rain. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "Ow," is his initial reply as he struggles to a sitting position and I kneel beside him. "Fucker hits hard." "Who?" "Girl. Who do you think?" "Fucking Josh." Chris rubs the back of his head. There's a slash in his shirt, but no blood. I tried to stop him. "Why would you do that?" I ask, nonplussed that he would put himself in such danger. But he just looks at me like I'm nuts. Why wouldn't I? Chris has only met Michael on 2 or 3 occasions, but he and I played together in preschool. And Michael is the man I want to marry. So even though he'd much rather paint canvases than throw punches, he tries to save Michael's life when there's nothing in it for him. I don't deserve such great friends. I say simply as I help him stand. "What do you mean?" "Addie, you're probably one of the sweetest people I know." I smile, undeserving of such praise. "I'm not feeling too sweet right now, I'll tell you that much." "Is Josh in the building?" "Probably." Chris grunts with effort as he sits in a chair.
I'm sorry.
"No, you're not the one who needs to be sorry. I'll be right back." With that, I run back to Michael's building. The small entrance corridor before the lobby is pristine, the glass door unharmed. Did Josh find another way inside? I buzz Michael's apartment repeatedly, with no answer, and then look at the list of apartments next to their buzzers and see the name of a woman I went to high school with. Back then, she had been very pretty and very ditzy, though even then I'd wondered whether it was an act. And there had always been rumors about Josh and her behind my back. Motherfucker. She buzzed him in the building. I briefly wonder if Josh is planning on visiting her after taking care of Michael, before recognizing that that bitch doesn't concern me in any way and I need to find another way up to the 5th floor. Though the answer is right in front of me. It won't be easy, but it's the only way. I exit the building and walk around to the side, looking up at Michael's living room window and balcony, measuring the distance from the ground. It would be a pretty trick, but it was doable. One glance all around tells me I'm alone on this street. So wasting no time, I change into my lycanthrope form, relying on the support of my claws and roughened palms and sawls. I leap onto the awning over the entrance to the pharmacy, above which is the residential high-rise. Standing on the awning, I hop over onto the higher awning over the entrance to the parking garage, and from there it's a quick jump onto the ledge of the actual building. Now comes the hard part. The balcony of the first apartment is about 3 feet above my head, and I have a very thin section of material to grab and hoist myself onto before the glass balustrade. And every balcony above it is the same. One misstep could cause me serious injury, or even kill me. But I have no other option, no room for trepidation. Michael needs me, and so I take a great leap forward. My talons catch on the ledge and my weight pulls on them, but once I'm firmly in place, I haul one leg up, getting the ball of my foot fixed against where the ledge meets the glass balustrade, and I press down to help lift the rest of myself up. From there, I simply step over the glass onto the balcony and catch my breath for a couple seconds, looking up at my journey. I need to do this 4 more times. Fuck my life. Luckily, getting up to the other balconies doesn't require jumping. Unluckily, it does require that I balance on the narrow top of a glass balustrade till I can grab the ledge of the balcony above me. Have you ever stood on the thin edge of a pane of glass while it was vertical? I don't recommend it. The metal edging over the thin glass digs into my foot, through my lycanthrope calluses, as I grab onto the ledge above me. Again I fix my claws, haul my leg, hoist myself up, and step over the balustrade.
Fix, haul, hoist.
Again and again, until I'm finally on Michael's balcony looking through the glass at his closed vertical blinds. I press on the sliding door, and it opens with little effort. For once I'm thankful he always forgets to lock this. Parting the blinds gently, I step through them and into the living room, closing the door behind me, reverting to my human form. When I turn around, I see Josh across the room, taking 2 steps forward before coming to a halt. "So nice of you to finally arrive," he says in a voice of honeyed venom. "You almost missed the show. Your precious hero is holed up in his bedroom, thinking a door will stop me. I wonder how on earth I could ever have been attracted to him. I just parkoured my ass up here. I don't need a hero, Josh." Evidently, he looks me up and down, like he's appraising me. "But surely you know you can do better than this Swindlewood. Swindlehurst. Whatever the fucker's name is, he's dead, and you can do better." "I can do better than you, too," I tell him, throwing down the gauntlet. I'm ready to fight for my future. Josh is silent for a long time, taking in my words. "So that's how it's going to be? If you don't walk out of this apartment right now and never come back, then yes." He looks down and to the left in what I at first think is embarrassed defeat. But then he enters his lycanthrope form and lunges at me. I think quickly, moving to the side and leaving my foot out for him to trip over it and into the door to the balcony. As his arm smacks into it, I hear glass shatter behind the blinds. Well, now it doesn't matter whether Michael locks the door. Josh leaps back upright and sees me in my lycanthrope form, and that seems to piss him off even more. He goes for me again, but I block his swing and make one of my own, my fist connecting with his jaw. After that, I bring my knee up into his gut, and as he doubles over, I bring my elbow down into the space between his shoulder blades. He groans in pain as he falls to the ground. I'm furious, but I'm not quite homicidal yet. So I revert to my human form and lean down to yell, "Leave now." He twists and pulls me down to the ground beside him, and before I know it, I'm on my stomach with my wrists behind my back, and Josh is on top of me. A less than pleasant memory of our night together after my high school class graduation bonfire flashes behind my eyelids, of him asking me, "Come on, are you my girlfriend or a cock tease?" Now he leans down and whispers, "Come on, stop fighting. Killing you is about the last thing I want to do. I do that and I'm a dead man." "Oh, so you wouldn't want to kill me for your safety, not because you'd actually be fucking killing me? For Christ's sake, would you shut the fuck up?" he shouts, slamming my head into the carpet. "Just shut up. Why can't you do that?" I snort at him. "Joshua, I've been shut up? Oh great, now you're going to Naomi Wolf me to death." Bam! I toss my head back and hit him in the nose, relishing his cry of pain. I do it again, more like wrenching myself back toward him, and make contact once more, and he falls back looking like he's seeing stars. I give him no time to recover, changing back into a lycanthrope and diving down onto his supine form. Josh barely gets out a pleading no before my sharp teeth dig into his neck, tearing at his jugular until it's completely severed and gushing, and his pathetic screams are mere gurgles, and then he's silent. Forever. I have never given in like that before, given in to the primal, animalistic rage. The blood coursing over my tongue and down my throat exhilarates me, sharpens my senses. I stand up and look around the living room, feeling the breeze and drizzle from outside blow through the vertical blinds onto my back. And then I glance down at what used to be Josh, dark blood pooling around his head, his eyes completely vacant. Poor Michael needs to get his carpet replaced now. In the meantime, I know I can't go to my boyfriend and tell him the coast is clear with blood all over my face. So reverting to my human self, I go into the bathroom and clean up. It's a good thing I'm wearing black, so no one can see the blood on my clothes. I look at my eyes in the bathroom mirror. They're the same blue-green as before, surrounded by the same eyelids and lashes, though my eyeshadow is a little patchy now. I look, for the most part, the same as I did before I left the house. Of course, that's because I am the same. This has always been me. After washing my mouth out with Listerine, I go over to Michael's bedroom door. "Babe, it's me. You can come out now. Everything's fine. Did you call the cops?" I hear what sounds like a weak imitation of Michael's voice, thready and unsure. Ask me from the other side. "Is he gone?" I give a short laugh. "You could say that, yeah. I took care of him." Silence on the other side. And to my surprise, the door doesn't immediately open. I hear indecipherable whispering on the other side, and then a distinctly feminine voice ask, "How the shit am I supposed to get to the—" Shut the fuck up. I step back from the door in shock. Michael never spoke to me that way before. Why would he speak to a woman in his room like that? And why was there even a woman in his room? Even though I already know the answer to that question, I shudder in revulsion. It can't be, even though I know it is. And I need to face it. I jimmy the knob, and it's still locked. So I just bring my lycanthrope back to kick the door open, then become human again. A pretty young blonde yelps in fright and leaps over to Michael, who wraps his arms around her. The sight makes me want to gag. And why is it always a blonde? "Did you call the cops?" I repeat, calmly, as though I didn't just kick a door in. With my bare foot, clearly reluctant, Michael shakes his head. "The guy said your dad sent him. No one calls the cops on your dad." Which is true. No one calls the cops on him. Not in this town, anyway. "Who is she?" I ask him, not wanting to address the blonde directly out of fear of puking. "I told you we should have called the cops." She whines next to him, clearly scared out of her mind. Rightfully so. "Will you fucking shut up?" "Don't talk to her like that," I blurt out, less to defend the insipid blonde than to school him. It takes all my effort to calm my heartbeat. "Michael, tell me, was there ever an LA?" Michael steps toward me. "Babe, Addie, please, let's just calm down." "Shut the fuck up." I snap. See how he likes it. I finally turn to the blonde who, sure enough, is wearing a negligee. "Did you know about me?" She hedges, looking around the room as though something will save her. She doesn't need to tell me. She's already showed me. So I turn back to Michael, but I'm still speaking to her. "I don't know your name, though I'm sure you know mine." "I don't need to know your name. But if you gather your things and leave this place right now, I'll let you go. I won't look for you. I won't do anything to you. I'll leave you alone to live your life however you see fit. But you need to make a choice. Right now." I wait. We all wait. And then she goes back over to Michael and stands in front of him valiantly. "I won't let you hurt him." I suppress my inner feminist long enough say, "You stupid bitch. You are one stupid bitch." Michael steps in front of her. "Adrastia, this ends now." And that's when I feel the smile break onto my face. You're right, it does end now. I release the wolf, and she has a field day with them. I have a field day. And by the time I'm done, blood covers the room in squiggles and splotches like a macabre crimson Jackson Pollock, giving me a warm, fuzzy feeling to rival the finest of scotches. The euphoria fills me to the brim, and overcome with emotion, I rear back and howl at the ceiling, my call even and resonant. And in the distance, I hear an answering howl of appreciation, much farther away than Chris, closer to my childhood home. Wrapping a cloth around one of Michael's ceramic kitchen knives, I cut through what's left of his neck and let the head drain in the sink while I wipe off my face again and rinse my mouth out with Listerine again. Then I wrap his head in cellophane, wash my hands, and exit the apartment like everything is normal. Coming out the front entrance, I see Chris look up and then stand up in shock. When I reach the wrought iron fence, he points to what I'm carrying under my arm. Is that Mike's head? Yeah. Okay. He was a cheating bastard. Oh, right. Chris looks like he thinks I might be insane. He might be right. And Josh? Oh yeah, he's dead too. Right. Well, are you planning on carrying that thing home? Just on the street? Because I drove here. So we take an uneventful drive back to my childhood home, with Chris muttering to himself about a human fucking head in his trunk every now and then. He's understandably rattled. But me? Calm as a lion lazing on a rock in the sun. I can't explain why I was so at peace in that car, despite what I did. Chris drops me off and says he's going home to sleep off tonight, and I walk through the front door like a queen. I initially go toward the study, but upstairs I can hear Husker Du jamming away. Highways fill with refugees now. Doctors finding out about disease with all this uptight pushing and shoving keeps us away from who we're loving. Zen Arcade is a double album. This was the second side of the second record. That means someone went up each time a side finished and flipped the record, or changed it accordingly, and was now at the end. I went up the stairs and into my old room, and sure enough my dad is standing by the record player, rocking out, some slightly milky ouzo sitting in tumbler on the desk. Dad! I shout over the music, startling him a bit, but he quickly moves to take the needle off the record, sending us into a chill quiet interrupted only by the soft patter of increasing rainfall. Unceremoniously, I drop Michael's cellophaned head onto the desk. Sorry, I didn't get the silver platter on my way up. Dad stares at the head for a long time. I tell him I killed Josh, too, but he doesn't react to my challenge. Not at first. Then he looks at me and gives me this great big smile. I always knew you had it in you. I'm sorry, what? I'm glad Josh got the stone, because the other two probably wouldn't have gone after Michael, and that would have blown the whole plan. What plan? For you to take over. He looks amazed that I didn't figure out his grand scheme. No way was I going to make you marry that pissant. But I wanted to make it so that I knew you would prove yourself. Aren't you going to ask me why I cut Michael's head off? Oh, I knew he was unfaithful, and I'm sorry, but I didn't want you to end up like Jason. I go silent at the mention of my late brother, and Dad explains. Remember how his fiancée miscarried, and then moved far away? Well, she moved, but she didn't miscarry. She had a healthy baby boy who was a completely different ethnicity from us. It was obvious. And Jason didn't die in a hiking accident. He sighs, while my world goes topsy-turvy. I took care of the interloper, though. Don't worry. Jason was avenged, and he was a good son and brother. But he was entirely too trusting and would never have done a good job as head of the family. You, though, he takes my shoulders in his hands. Your mother and I kept trying till we got our little girl. And you, Adrastia, are our greatest achievement. The empire will be safe in your hands. As I drink wine from the wolf's goblet, I know I will make my own future with whomever I please. The world is not an oyster. It is a current. As I drink the wine, I know. The sun rises and sets without men. O Elios Anatelii Kai Orizii Corizandres. I repeat to my dad. I gynax, he replies. Or women.